Breaking tonight, for the first time in the entire history of North American trade, Canada and Mexico are not sitting on opposite sides of the table from Washington. They're sitting on the same side. And the person who said it out loud wasn't a Canadian official. It wasn't a leaked memo. It wasn't an anonymous source whispering to a reporter in a hallway. It was the President of Mexico herself, standing at her own podium, telling the world that Ottawa and Mexico City have quietly built something the United States never saw coming. A common front. Now stop and think about why that phrase matters. For 30 years, the whole American playbook for North America rested on one simple assumption: that Canada and Mexico would never truly work together. They're too different languages, different economies, different priorities. Washington always sat in the middle, holding the leverage, picking off one partner at a time. Divide and rule. That was the game. And on Monday, the President of Mexico just told everyone the game has changed. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, because the timing here is everything. In 1 week, on July 1st, Canada, Mexico, and the United States are holding a virtual meeting. Not just any meeting. This is the first formal trilateral session between all three countries since the future of CUSMA was thrown into doubt. CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement, is the deal that replaced NAFTA, the deal that governs trillions of dollars in cross-border trade, the deal that decides whether your car parts, your groceries, your oil, your steel move freely across this continent. On July 1st, all three governments put their cards on the table. And here's what we already know about those cards. Canada has formally said it wants to extend the agreement for another 16 years. Mexico has formally said the exact same thing. Two governments, same position, same goal, locked in before the meeting even starts. And the United States? Silence. Donald Trump first threatened not to renew the very deal he signed during his first term. Then he turned around and suggested he might sign it after all. Then nothing. No formal position, no clear answer. Two of the three partners walked into this knowing exactly what they want, and the third is still keeping everyone guessing. That is the backdrop. Now here's the moment that changes the story. A CBC reporter asked Sheinbaum directly about Canada at her regular morning news conference. And instead of the usual diplomatic non-answer, she said it plainly. Mexico and Canada have formed a common front through the communications that we have. She said the relationship between the two countries has strengthened. She pointed to Canadian business investment flowing into Mexico, and she said, in her own words, that commerce between them is getting stronger. Translation: Mexico just publicly confirmed that it has been coordinating with Canada behind the scenes, lining up a shared strategy before sitting down with Washington. Dear viewers, understand what you are watching here. This is not two countries that happen to agree by accident. This is two countries that talked to each other first, aligned their positions first, and then decided to face the United States together. That is the definition of a front. And Sheinbaum chose to announce it 1 week before the most important trade meeting on the continent. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, not just hear what happened, but understand what it actually means for Canada's place in the world, this is the channel that connects those dots. So stay with me, because the next part shows you why Washington has every reason to be nervous. Here's the strategic trap the United States walked into. For months, the American side has insisted on something very specific. They want separate talks. They want to negotiate with Mexico on one track and Canada on another track. Sit down with one, then sit down with the other. And if you understand power, you understand exactly why. When you talk to each partner alone, you control the room. You can offer one side a deal that quietly hurts the other. You can play them against each other. You can make each one feel like they're competing for American goodwill. But Sheinbaum just shut that door. She said Mexico has always favored trilateral negotiations. All three countries in the same room at the same time. And now Canada is standing right beside her, wanting the same 16-year extension, sharing the same channels of communication. Translation: Washington wanted two separate, weaker conversations it could dominate. Instead, it's getting one unified bloc that already knows what it wants. And Sheinbaum didn't stop at the politics. She named the reason out loud. She said everyone knows the United States, under President Trump, has adopted a different vision of international commerce, one that has become, in her words, more protectionist. Talks, she said, are happening within that framework. She put it right on the table. The reason Canada and Mexico are drawing closer is because the partner to their north has been pulling away. Now let me show you the part of this story that turns words into something solid. Because a common front sounds nice. It sounds like diplomacy. But fronts that aren't backed by real economics collapse the moment they're tested. So let's look at the numbers, and the numbers are stunning. In 2025, Canada and Mexico traded about 62 billion Canadian dollars in goods. 62 billion. Now compare that to 1994, the year NAFTA was signed. Back then, total trade between Canada and Mexico was just under $5 billion. So in roughly 3 decades, this relationship didn't just grow, it exploded more than 12-fold. And here's why that 12-fold jump matters more than it might sound. Trade that grows that fast doesn't just move money, it rewires economies. Factories get built around it. Supply chains get redrawn around it. Jobs on both sides start to depend on it. So when two countries quietly let their trade multiply by 12 over 30 years, they aren't just doing business, they're slowly fusing their interests together until pulling apart becomes almost unthinkable. That's the foundation sitting underneath everything Sheinbaum announced. The politics are new. The economics that made the politics possible have been building for 3 decades. And it's still accelerating right now. Canada was the second largest destination for Mexican goods last year, and Mexican exports to Canada grew 17% in a single year between 2024 and 2025. 17% in 12 months. That is not a friendship cooling off. That is a partnership catching fire at the exact moment the United States is turning inward. Dear viewers, this is the piece most people are going to miss. The political alliance Sheinbaum just announced isn't built on speeches. It's built on a trade relationship that has been quietly compounding for 30 years, growing faster than ever, right under Washington's nose. And it's getting physical too, built into ports and steel and ships. Sheinbaum pointed to a specific deal as proof of where this is heading. Canadian investment is now flowing into the port of Altamira, in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas, on the Gulf of Mexico. A Montreal-based company, Logistec, struck a deal to buy a port facility there, one that specializes in handling steel and heavy industrial material, the kind of cargo too big to ever fit inside a shipping container. The Canadian federal government highlighted that deal as one of the major wins from a massive Team Canada trade mission, one of the largest ever assembled, that landed in Mexico back in February. Sheinbaum's read on it was direct. She said this will allow much more maritime commerce between Mexico and Canada, going both ways, both directions, a two-way ocean highway between the two countries, bypassing the need to route everything through American hands. Translation: Canada and Mexico are now building the physical infrastructure to trade directly with each other, by sea, so they're less dependent on the road through the United States. Think about what that represents. For decades, the assumption was that North American trade flows like a wheel, with the United States as the hub and everyone else as a spoke. Goods move up and down through America, America in the middle, holding the center. But a port deal on the Gulf of Mexico, Canadian money buying Canadian access, ships moving steel directly between Tamaulipas and Canadian harbors. That's a new line being drawn, a line that connects the two spokes directly to each other and goes around the hub. This is what strategic independence actually looks like. Not a press release, not a photo op, A port, a shipping lane, a 17% jump in trade, and a president willing to say the words common front out loud 1 week before the meeting that decides the next 16 years. So as that July 1st meeting approaches, here is the real question hanging over the continent. Washington walked into these talks believing it held all the leverage, the biggest economy, the most to offer, the power to divide. But Sheinbaum just revealed that while America was deciding whether it even wanted the deal, its two neighbors were busy deciding they wanted each other. Canada didn't wait to be told its place in someone else's order. It went out, built the relationships, signed the deals, sent the trade missions, bought the port, and now, when it matters most, it has a partner standing beside it at the table. The United States wanted two weaker conversations it could control. What it's getting instead is one front it can't. That's the story tonight. Two middle powers, written off for 30 years as too different to ever align, choosing this exact moment to stand together. And the message her sending to Washington is impossible to miss. Canada and Mexico will decide the future of this continent with the United States, if they can, but increasingly they're prepared to shape it without waiting for permission. This is Canada Next. I'll see you tomorrow.